Welcome to Trinity Church of Austin. I'm Sid Hall, Trinity's lead minister. We are yearning to be back in person. Because of the coronavirus emergency, we are choosing to stay safe by streaming our service over the internet. We are taking the pandemic seriously and are closing our doors to gatherings for the foreseeable future. Phone numbers for texting prayer requests, a downloadable order of worship, email addresses for Pastoral Care, and instructions for supporting Trinity are in the description of the YouTube video below, and much of this information will also appear on the screen. Have you ever felt like a third wheel? Life on the outside of the in crowd can make it difficult to feel at home. The Gospel of Luke chronicles Jesus' ministry with those on the so-called outside. This worship series, entitled The Outsiders, is not about us, the church, on the inside and others on the outside. The door swings both ways. Marginalization, rejection, and feelings of unbelonging are not things we can just see by looking at a person. Even though we gather every Sunday and seek to grow our community by inviting people who are not yet part of our church family, we really can't know what behaviors, attitudes, perspectives from each other's sense of belonging or keep us from feeling connected to the people closest to us. This series is designed to be a catalyst for starting some conversations about how we can offer radical hospitality without making assumptions about our neighbors and those who are yet to venture into our sacred space. Today our focus is on the lonely. At the end of our welcome time, we will light a candle to begin our worship and to create sacred space together. If you have a candle at home and you'd like to light it with us, please feel free to do so. At Trinity, we want you to know that whether we're meeting face to face or over live streaming, we believe that no matter who you are, who you love, what you believe or don't believe, you are welcome here. Welcome, friends, to the celebration.
Hi, I'm Tim Brace, Director of Music at Trinity Church of Austin. During our threshold moments for this series, we are singing a song entitled My Love Colors Outside the Lines by Gordon Light, a singer-songwriter and former bishop in the Anglican Church of Canada. My love, my God, my soul, take me to places where I've never been before, and open doors to worlds outside the lines. Lauren will provide piano leadership and the lyrics will be presented to you. Please stand in body and/or spirit and sing with me.
My love colors outside the lines, exploring paths that few could ever find. Takes me into places where I've never been before and opens doors to worlds outside the lines. My God colors outside the lines, turns wounds to blessings, water into wine. takes me into places where I've never been before, and opens doors to worlds outside the lines.
Have you ever felt utterly alone, even just for a moment? Imagine the widow who has lost both husband and son. The pain must be almost unbearable, and yet Jesus says, "Do not weep." Loneliness happens for many reasons and can create feelings of isolation, even in the midst of a crowd. Jesus knows this pain and raises us up to be comfort for one another. How are we called to rise up and comfort the lonely?
My soul longs to color outside the lines. Tear back the curtains, sun, come in and shine. I want to walk beyond the boundaries where I've never been before. Throw open doors to worlds outside the lines.
Hi, Trinity family. This is
Abby, Papa, and Daddy. We are going to read a book called Boys Love Pink, and I'm going to jump in the pool after I finish this.
Can you say one more time what the name of the book is?
Boys Love Pink.
Pink is for boys. Okay. All right. Pink is for boys and girls. And bows on fancy clothes. Blue is for girls and boys. And uniforms on a team. Yellow is for boys and girls. And a crown to wear. Green is for girls and boys. And grass to run on. Red is for boys and girls. And cars racing along the track. Orange is for girls and boys. And popsicles dribbling down sticky chins. Sounds yummy. Purple is for boys and girls. And unicorns because
Unicorn.
brown is for girls and boys. And teddy bears to cuddle. Black and white are for boys and girls. And puppies and kittens to pet. And all of the colors are for everyone, girls and boys.
And there are rainbows and butterflies.
The end.
In the sky.
In the sky. The end. All right, Addie, one last thing. What are you going to do?
For meditation for today, I'd like to practice and focus on something that you do thousands of times a day. I calculated I've done this over 500 million times in my lifetime, and that is breathing. I'd like to suggest that there is a way to do this that is optimal for your health, and also a way to bring mindfulness and awareness into your life. Breathing is central to many spiritual and meditative practices around the world. You probably have either said this or heard someone say this when someone is feeling a lot of stress, and someone will say, just breathe, just breathe. There's something to that in bringing the mind into the body and centering it and calming it. So put Stand or sit, either is fine. I like to stand. Put one hand over your chest and one hand over your navel. And I want you to find out where you breathe. So take some breaths, just normal breaths, not really small, but not really big. And pay attention to what moves, your chest or your belly or both. What primarily moves when you breathe in and you breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. You're already increasing your awareness and your mindfulness just doing this. Now, most people breathe mostly through their chest. So you would breathe and you would see this and your stomach would stay where it was. Some people do both. People who've been trained to diaphragm breathe, like singers and some instrumentalists, will do that as a rule. And if you already do that, that's good, because that's what I want everyone to try to do today. So again, put one hand over your chest and one hand over your belly. And I want you to take a few breaths. Try to keep your chest without moving and breathe. Deliberately bring the breath into your stomach, as it were. Your chest might move a little bit, but we don't want it to do this. We want the stomach to fill in. You relax your stomach, relax your chest, relax your shoulders. And I want you this week, if you can, practice this. Be mindful about breathing into your diaphragm. So just for a few seconds here, pay attention to your breath. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. And you are practicing awareness and mindfulness just by bringing your mind into your body. Good way to relax at any time. But for now, I want to focus on developing the breathing into the diaphragm. A couple more times. If you closed your eyes, please open them. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Mark Moore. I'm the associate minister here at Trinity. And this is the time that we hear your prayers by text. And if you don't get your prayer in the time allotted, please feel free to type your prayer into the YouTube video chat box. And remember, we record all of these prayers and review them together as a staff. And I invite you now into a time and an attitude of prayer. Are there prayers now that you would offer for our lives and our community? Please text your brief prayers to 512-766-3123. Prayers for Dr. Elizabeth Cavalli and others on the front line caring for those with COVID-19, especially with those who are dying. Healing and joyful spirit. Receive our prayer. A prayer for blessings for Rad and Kirk. A prayer of gratitude for the work of Mary Trump. Joyful and healing spirit. Receive our prayers. A prayer from Elizabeth Price. back in the hospital for stroke-related complications, healing and joyful spirit, receive our prayers. Prayer for teachers and students and staff having to go back to school in person. A prayer for the life of solving a Turpin, scholar and friend, healing and joyful spirit. Prayers for children to be released from detention and that their parents will be released with them. Joyful and healing spirit, receive our prayers. Prayers for those who are facing eviction and other hardships due to this pandemic, that they may find help. A prayer for thanksgiving of the life of John Lewis. Healing and joyful spirit, receive our prayers. For Chuck Ragland, who is struggling in his healthcare facility during the COVID pandemic lockdown, healing and joyful spirit, receive our prayer. Prayers of healing and comfort for Leah and the Stavenhagen Asbury family and Cindy. Healing and joyful spirit, receive our prayer. Prayer for the life of Doug Upchurch. Healing and joyful spirit, receive our prayer. Let us hold these prayers and those cradled in the silence of our hearts in a moment of silence. Please be in a spirit of prayer. God, you are my lover, my longing, my flowing stream, my sun, and I am your reflection. The day of my spiritual awakening was the day that I saw and knew I saw all things in God and God in all things. Amen.
For this series, for our song of reflection, we have chosen Spirit of Life by Carolyn McDade. Carolyn describes herself as a songwriter, spiritual feminist, and social activist. She says, "My community is a loose community of women. I call myself a woman of faith, seeking with others to touch what matters." Our choir has gathered virtually to provide the voices for this song, but we hope you'll contribute yours as well. Mark Boyden has again created a wonderful video for us with a body prayer by Dave Robinson and Carol Lewis, who will be joined by Light German. Please stand in body and or spirit and sing with us.
giving light, the shape of justice, bruised, holy cross, may set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Good morning, Trinity family. My name is Stephanie Molnar, and I've been a member of Trinity for, I think, about 14 years. I should check on that. And it's my pleasure to share the first reading with you this morning, which is Luke 7, verses 12 through 14. As Jesus approached the gate of the town, a man who had died was being carried out. He was his mother's only son, and she was a widow, and with her was a large crowd from the town. When Jesus saw her, he had compassion for her and said to her, "Do not weep." Then he came forward and touched the bier, and the bearers stood still. And he said, "Young man, I say to you, rise."
Good morning, Trinity. My name's Janelle Gola. Myself and my two boys, Elias and Liam, have been with Trinity for over 3 years now, and it's just been so good for our hearts and souls and spirits, and very blessed to be with you. I'm going to share a reading with you today. It comes from Elizabeth Gilbert from Eat, Pray, Love in 2006. I'm here. I love you. I don't care if you need to stay up crying all night long. I will stay with you. If you need the medication again, go ahead and take it. I will love you through that as well. If you don't need the medication, I will love you too. There's nothing you can ever do to lose my love. I will protect you until you die. And after your death, I will still protect you. I am stronger than depression, and I am braver than loneliness, and nothing will ever exhaust me.
One of the first novels that I ever read was one by S.E. Hinton called The Outsiders. It was an assigned book in 7th grade, and it was a book about social unrest and class division and the struggle, the existential angst of what it means to live in the midst of that. It was memorable, and so I decided recently to look it back up and just learn what I could about it. I found out that S.E. Hinton was only 15 when she began to write it, and it was published by Viking Press when she was 18 years old in 1967. So that means I would have read it just a few years after it was first published. What I really liked about it was the way it depicted the divisions in society. Two groups of people, the socials and the greasers. The socials were called the socios. And so these two groups were at each other's throats all the time in school. And the greasers were envious of the socios because they seemed to have it all. They were living in luxury, and they had nice clothes, and they lived on the west side of the city that was more affluent. But the socios were actually a little bit envious of the greasers because they were always seemed to be more free to do whatever they wanted, at least in the socios' minds. And so there was gang fighting, there was class struggle, and there was true class division in this small town. And of course the novel was very effective in bringing things to a head, to a clash. And there were deaths that happened in a gang fight, and then there was a sense that at the end that how much of this is really worth it. But what I liked about the novel more than really what I learned about social class, which was really an introduction to me, was the main character, Ponyboy. He was a greaser who had to pretend to be cool But inside he was soft in some ways. But he learned very quickly that you have to hide that if you're going to be a greaser, if you're going to live in that rough and tumble world. And the book in some ways was told in his first person from Ponyboy's perspective. And there was, in the midst of a gang fight, a poem by Robert Frost that talked about what it meant to be gold. And Johnny, at the very end of the story, told Ponyboy, stay gold. And I think what connected me with that is, in the midst of my own middle school angst, in the midst of my own loneliness, I realized that I too didn't know where I fit in. I wondered if I fit with the people around me, if they knew who I really was and what I really believed and what I really thought, if they would like me. And I struggled with that. And I think that the book not only taught me about social division and social class and the nature of that in the world, but also how you can be a part of a group and still not feel like you completely belong. It was a good introduction to understanding how loneliness is a part of our lives at various points all along the way. And some of us struggle with it more than others. And during this time of pandemic, I think we especially feel alone. There are people who are out there working hard in the world and don't have the luxury of being socially distanced. And there's a loneliness in that, because they're feeling like everyone else out in the world is able to have choices that they don't have. And so those divisions, those social class divisions, create a particular kind of loneliness. Then there are those that are in their homes, maybe quarantined with people that they don't love or who do not love them. And there's a loneliness to that as well. And then I think for just anyone who's living through this time, there are feelings that stir up, that remind us of old times in our lives, times in the past when loneliness took over and we wondered where our place was in the world. And if there's any comfort in what we're going through, there seems to be this thing where we're all going through it at some level together. And they say that misery loves company. Well, maybe that's what that is. I don't know. But there's this sense that we're all on this journey together. Our gospel lesson today talks about an incident that happened in Jesus' ministry that is all about that loneliness. Jesus understood that there were outsiders and insiders in his life. And one of the things that we see over and over again, especially in the Gospel of Luke, which has Jesus reaching into deep compassion. He's a healer more than anything else in Luke's perspective. And Luke was a doctor himself, and so he has that perspective of Jesus as the healer. And we see Jesus reaching out to people who were deeply lonely, deeply broken, deeply discounted, who felt and were, in fact, societally on the outside. And incident after incident, we see Jesus stepping through that and breaking down those barriers. What's interesting about the text that we see today is it's a woman whose son has just died. And we learn from the text that the woman was a widow. And what that means, and it says what we know about widows in those days is that women didn't have a working world for themselves. They often, once their husbands died, they were dependent on the livelihood of their sons, not their daughters, for their own living. There was no social network. There was no net to take care of you. And that's really, those things are recent kinds of historical creations. And many in our own society don't have those even now. Well, this woman was one of those. By knowing that she was a widow, we knew that in many ways, economically, socially, she was an outsider. She was on the fringe. And the only thing that kept her from falling off the edge was the fact that she had a son who could work. But in this story, this very brief story in Luke, we see that her son has died, and she is in a place of desperation and weeping. And it must be the kind of weeping that is inconsolable. And Jesus says to her, "Do not weep." Now, that sounds insensitive to me. If someone was weeping that I came across, I wouldn't say that. But what we get here is that Jesus was reaching in beyond the superficial into a place of true consolation. It says that he touched the bier, which is the cart that they were rolling the dead body of her son out of the gate into the city on, probably taking him to a place for burial. And when he touched the bier, when he touched that cart, it was like a stillness occurred all around for her, for the disciples, for all who were observing. And in the midst of that, Jesus reaches into her pain and he says a command, come alive. He says, young man, I say to you, rise. Now, what we know is that Luke was written in the latter half of the first century of the Common Era. We know that it was written in an early church who believed strongly in the theology of resurrection, that Jesus was resurrected from the dead, and that they too, as followers of Jesus, would be part of the last great rising. And so this idea of rising from the dead was not an unusual thing. In our day, and in my own theology, I wouldn't necessarily hold on to that myth. But that was common in that. So this story is not unusual. Now, whether Jesus actually said that, or that's a projection from the latter part of the first century into the words of Jesus, which is what I think it probably was, it still functions in the same way in the story, that your hope is not lost. There is more to this than what you're seeing. Perhaps this was a real incident. It says it happened in the area of Galilee and in the city of Nain, which is near Tiberias, around the Sea of Galilee. And that's where Jesus did much of his teaching. So there were those that were walking around following him, knowing that he was a healer, waiting for the opportunity for just anything to occur. And so it could be that this was a real incident where Jesus reached into the pain of a woman feeling great loss and brought comfort and strength. The point of the story, I think, is that even in the midst of death, we're in the midst of life. Even in the midst of pain, we can, and even in the midst of incredible aloneness, we can find new hope. And this story was a reminder to the early church that they too, experiencing death all around them, could rise in comfort and strength to new possibilities. So I don't need for the story to be literal in my own mythology. I can feel the compassion of Jesus reaching in to this woman's pain and bringing about the possibility of connectedness in a profound way just by reading the text. And folks, I think we need that so much today. Elizabeth Gilbert in Eat, Pray, Love talks about loneliness. And she talks about what it means to sit with someone, to be with someone, to connect with someone, and how it doesn't fix everything. You can't take away another's pain. You can't wave a magic wand and make it all better. But there's something about being connected. And that's what I hope that you'll hear in the midst of this message today. There are so many different ways that we experience loneliness. Sometimes it's just being alone, knowing that we're alone in a situation, knowing that the experience we're having is like no one else's. When someone is experiencing loss, the loss of a loved one, the last thing you say is, I know how you feel, even if you have experienced the loss of a loved one. Because the kind of aloneness that is felt belongs to that person only. It is their own. And so we need to find ways to honor that and not rush in to try to fix it, to place a Band-Aid over an open wound. It doesn't work. And so we need to respect that sense of aloneness and know that when they're experiencing that, whether it's the loss of a loved one, whether it's health, the loss of a job, or whether it's some sort of crisis in their life of a relationship that has gone sour, that they know that their aloneness is real and it's honored. One of the favorite songs about loneliness and aloneness for me is a song called Sand and Water by Beth Nielsen Chapman. She wrote it after the death of her husband, and she was raising a small child, and these words are just so powerful. She says, all alone I didn't like the feeling. All alone I sat and cried. All alone I had to find some meaning in the center of the pain I felt inside. All alone I came into this world. All alone I will someday die. Solid stone is just sand and water, baby. Sand and water, and 1,000,000 years gone by. That kind of aloneness is something that we all feel in this human life from time to time. And there's nothing anyone from the outside can do to take it away. It is part of what it means to be truly human. There's another kind of aloneness that occurs, and it's when you feel like you don't belong. You may feel that even when you're not alone physically, when you're in the midst of a crowd, if you're working in the wrong setting, if you're in the wrong marriage, if you're in the wrong stage of life where nothing is working for you, your body's breaking down, and you just wonder, what happened? How did I get here? How did I get to be in this lonely place? That sense of aloneness is something that most of us also feel from time to time. And then there's that existential aloneness, that kind that comes from recognizing that we're all mortal, that we truly are, in some ways, even in the midst of community, we're all individuals, we're all alone. No one can fully grasp who we are. And sometimes that can weigh us down so deeply that it leads to despair and deep depression. Or sometimes it can be the catalyst to recognize that, oh, this is something we all feel, and how can I be sensitive to others when they're in that midst of existential crisis, when they are feeling utterly alone in the world, when they are lonely and need the comfort of a friend, of someone who cares. I remember when I was going through a divorce, which was a difficult time in my life, and I went through that very publicly. At Trinity, I had been there for a number of years, 15 years or so, and when I knew that it was happening, I asked my ex-wife if she would stand there with me in a congregational meeting to share with the congregation that we were going through divorce. And I asked the congregation for love and support, but I said, you don't need to fix this. It's not your fixing. But in the midst of my own struggles, I had times of tremendous anxiety and where I just felt terrified. And I didn't preach on that. I didn't share it. It was too raw, too new to even know how to articulate it. But it was at times all-consuming. And I remember saying to my therapist, there doesn't seem to be anything to comfort me in the midst of this. I don't seem to have any mechanism, any tool that I've used in the past to know how to bring strength and comfort. I feel I've got people around me who love me. I have people who tell me they love me, who tell me they support me, and yet inside I feel terrified. I feel absolutely, utterly alone. And she said, have you ever felt that way before? And I said, I not that I can think of. But as I went home and reflected on it, I remembered a time when I was maybe in 4th or 5th grade, and my parents would go to dinner with friends just about every Friday evening. And even though I would could leave them and go play and whatever, there was something that would happen when my parents would leave and out the driveway. I would just be inconsolable. I went through a period where I was crying. I was scared. I was afraid, and so I learned much later that my mother actually took me to a psychiatrist to find out if there was something wrong with me because it was such a strange behavior. And I was embarrassed by it because my younger sisters were fine with the babysitter. The babysitter was there, and we had fun, and there I was, the oldest child, standing at the end of the driveway watching the car drive away, crying inconsolably. And my poor mother, at different times, she would get out of the car, go back, try to comfort me, say, it's okay. She didn't know what to do. And she would comfort me, and I would feel fine for a moment, and then she'd get back in the car and leave, and I'd be back there crying all over again. So I asked my mother when I was going through divorce, I said, what do you remember about that time? What was there something weird going on? Was I going through something? What was that? Because that's how I'm feeling now, and if I could connect with that, then I might figure out where this existential loneliness is coming from. And she says, I don't think there was anything going on that was unusual. We didn't know what to do. And she says, and I said, was that the only time that I was ever like that? And she says, well, there was another time when you were about a year old, and I was pregnant with your sister. You got the German measles. And the doctor told me that I needed to go stay with my parents. So you stayed with your dad at home, and I left. And even though we talked on the phone, I was gone for about 3 weeks. And you were fine. You seemed normal, and your dad said you were normal. But she said, when I came back and after you were over your illness, when I just go out to the store or I just go into work, you were inconsolable. It was sort of pre-language. You didn't have words to articulate it, but you were clingy and scared, and you wouldn't let go of me. And she says, that time when you were in 5th grade reminded me of that. And that was the connection I was looking for. What I was feeling didn't have words. It was pre-language for me. It was some deep pain. It was like an old wound that had never completely healed, but the skin had grown over it, and somehow that had been brushed open again. And the wound wasn't the divorce itself. The divorce reminded me of an existential loneliness that was there before I could even remember, pre-verbal in my mind. We all have those kinds of things. And so one of the things that my therapist suggested is, well, your mother couldn't comfort you when she was driving off. She'd get out of the car and sit with you or talk to you. Then she'd get back in. What would work? And I said, I don't know. And she says, let's try this. Why don't you imagine yourself as a 5th grader and then see yourself now at the end of the driveway and just go sit with little Sid. Just sit with him. You don't have to fix anything. You don't have to say anything. Just sit with him. Let him know somehow that you're going to stay there for as long as it takes, so he doesn't need to worry. And I thought, okay, I'll try it. I'll try anything. That became my meditation anytime I felt anxious. And guess what? Over a relatively short period of time, I found that I could bring comfort to myself. Not by fixing it, not by having words that were the right words, but simply by sitting, by being. Here's what Elizabeth Gilbert says, and you heard this earlier in our reading, but I want to articulate it because I think this to me is where we can be helpful in the midst of each other's loneliness. She said, I am here. I love you. I don't care if you need to stay up crying all night long. I will stay with you. If you need the medication again, go ahead and take it. I will love you through that as well. If you don't need the medication, I will love you too. There is nothing you can ever do to lose my love. I will protect you until you die, and after your death I will still protect you. I am stronger than the depression, and I am braver than loneliness, and nothing will ever exhaust me. My friends, we can't fix loneliness. It's a part of our lives. It happens whether we're going through a divorce, whether we're realizing our own mortality, whether we've been placed on the outside of a social group that we really want to be a part of. It happens systemically when everyone in society of privilege seems to rise ahead and climb further, and those who are not in privilege are pushed to the side, marginalized further and further, a profound societal loneliness. If we want to understand Black Lives Matter, if we want to understand gay pride, we need to understand that it comes from the kind of loneliness, systemic loneliness, where society has marched on and large segments of that society have not. And if we're part of that privileged group, then we need to stop and move back and sit along the road, not fixing it, not coming up with answers, not being brilliant, but sitting and staying and saying, like Elizabeth Gilbert said, nothing will ever exhaust me. I am here to stay. My friends, Jesus understood that. What we glean from his ministry is that he was able to reach into that kind of pain. And his real miracle working was not fixing people's physical problems or rising people from the dead. It's a great story, great mythology. But what I feel certain of is that he had a different kind of profound healing presence with people. They knew when he stopped and touched the bier, he was with them, and that nothing would exhaust him. In your loneliness, please know that you are not alone. As the psalmist says, nothing can ever separate you. I will be with you, my spirit will be with you, even to the ends of the earth, the deepest parts of the sea, the highest mountains, the farthest place that you can imagine. I am with you, even to the end.
For our song of response today, let us sing together the song You Are There by Julie Howard, with extra verses added by our own Sid Hall. This song, with its reminder that God is ever present, is included in our Trinity songbook and is a song with which many of you will be familiar. Please stand in body and or spirit, and let us sing together.
In the quiet crib of evening, in the sinking of the days, in the silky void of darkness, you are there. In the lapses of my breathing, in the space between my rays, in the crater carved by sadness, you are there. You are there, you are there, you are there. In the rest between the phrases, in the cracks between the stars, in the gaps between the meaning, you are there. In the melting down of endings, in the cooling of the sun, in the solstice of the winter, you are there. You are there, you are there, you are there. In the mystery of my hungers, in the silence of my wounds, in the cloud of my unknowing, you are there. In the empty cave of breathing, in the desert of my dreams, in the tunnel of my sorrow, you are there. You are there, you are there. In the faith that can move mountains, in the hope beyond despair, in the love we are beholding, you are there. In the rhythm of the dancing, in creation's distant spark, in the beauty of love's blessing, you are there. You are there, you are there, you are there.
everybody. I'm Mark Boyden. This is Carol.
Lewis, and I've been at Trinity since 1990.
And I'm so glad to be in a safe space here with y'all where I can take off my mask.
I went to a Wesley Foundation meeting, and Sid was talking that night. Talked about the inclusivity of the church and the creation spirituality.
I wanted to find a church that drew outside the lines, had a more modern understanding and interpretation of what religion and spirituality meant.
I went to Hancock Center.
We went to Hancock. It was beautiful. Such a great...
We sat in a circle, and they had art and lots of open-minded people, and there was a really good vibe.
So unique and vibrant. And then I got to know the entire church, and we've had
People are the core. And they're very service-minded and social justice-minded, caring and heartfelt, and kind of people you want to hang out with.
And we're involved in a whole number of things. The homeless shelter, the food pantry, the sanctuary network, LGBTQ issues.
Trinity hasn't used the traditional language, the patriarchal language, and I appreciate that.
That's what really continues to draw me back is, well, two things. What everybody does. Okay, 3. Yeah, 4! Who they are as people in the community. You can just tell once you get to know any individual that comes to this church. And of course there's the messages that come through the services.
We pull on different traditions, Native American, Wiccan, Jewish, etc., in addition to Christian, mostly Christian-centered.
Whether it's Sid or Mark or Gus or Susan or the others that have come before, it's always thoughtful and inspiring and challenging.
Oh, and I loved Sid's series on lyrics from popular music. Yeah, I enjoy Easter when we put the flowers on the wire cross and dance around it.
You mean this t-shirt right here?
Yes, that's...
They got nice rainbow stripes and our cool logo. And we can go out and show our colors, our pride. There are people in the community who don't attend the church, but periodically remind me that they're so glad that we are here doing the things that we do. And I am too. And so I would invite you, as able, make a donation, get yourself a t-shirt.
This pin can be yours. Not this particular one, but you can get one just like it. And it's beautiful. It's a rainbow and it signifies the church.
We'll be back together physically too, and I look forward to seeing you in person then.
You know, it doesn't feel weird anymore because that's the norm for me now. I have to think of it in contrast of other churches that I've been to. But now this is weird is normal or whatever. You can cut that part.
Now is the time that we bring forth our offerings. In our worship space at Trinity, we always have 2 opportunities for our offerings. A wooden bowl for the support of the programs and ministries of Trinity. And Trinity remains committed to the health and well-being of the whole community. We remain committed to following the advice and guidance of health professionals and scientists as we all yearn to embrace this beloved community, and to act in typical Trinity fashion to support those in need and those who are oppressed and those who are made invisible. Your support for Trinity is critical for us to meet the commitment that we made to the well-being of this community and this broader community, first in our hearts and in our actions. And that means to continue to worship online for a while longer, and to continue paying the dedicated folks who work with our children and our hourly staff, and to making our facilities available for Hope Food Pantry and the Homeless Task Force. We also have a woven basket each week for a special offering, and this week it is for the Keep Church Weird fundraiser that you just heard Carol and Mark talk about. For years, we've held a summer spectacular fundraiser, and this year it's just a little bit weird. Now, there are several methods which you can use to give to Trinity today. You can visit our website at www.trinitychurchofaustin.org and then click the Support tab and scroll down that page to find the options there. You may download the Give Plus mobile app from either iTunes or Google Play, and you may also text your offering to 512-967-0292 and add the keyword Keep It Weird to support the Keep It Weird fundraiser. And if you want to give to both the general fund and the special offering, send 2 texts, one with the Keep It Weird keyword and one without. Please send Trinity your most generous offerings today.
Hey Trinity, this is Gus, your intern minister, here with a few announcements before we close out the service. The first announcement is, as always, Pastoral Care is available. You can either reach out to Sid's phone number directly, which is down in the description, or you can email pastoralcare@trinitychurchofaustin.org. That email address goes to just myself, Sid, and Mark, the pastoral staff only. The second announcement is that we have our Keep Church Weird fundraiser ongoing. You can donate to receive or give a Rainbow Trinity t-shirt or pin. If you can't afford to donate, you can request a scholarship t-shirt or pin. No purchase or donation is required to get a shirt. You can just ask for one of those too. You can find information, a link below in the description for how to get to those. We have a virtual catch-up for youth, teens and tweens. That's Saturday, July 25th at 4 p.m. There's Google Meet info will be sent separately to the parents. If you want more information on that, just reach out to Joe at trinitychurchofaustin.org. That's J-O-E. That's Joe Lundy, our youth director. And also the Trinity Parents Care of the Soul book club going on, reading the book Raising White Kids. This group starts August 2nd, Sunday evenings at 8:30 p.m. And for information and a link to the Google Hangout, email office@trinitychurchofAustin.org to join. That's all we have. I'll hand it off to Sid for the benediction.
Since meeting virtually in mid-March, we've been asking ourselves as a staff and as a congregation, how might we still reach out to those people who are visiting? And it's all a work in progress. We're trying to figure that out. We're trying to reach out the best we can. Well, we want to create an opportunity for those that would like to unite with us formally. There are new people always checking us out. And we want you to know that even though we don't treat you any differently, whether you're a member or a visitor, if you would like to join Trinity and be a part of our community, we want you to know that that is possible. And so I would like to encourage you to consider that. And if you have questions and want to know more about who we are as a congregation, our values, our history, whatever it is, I want you to feel like you can reach out to me and let us know. And we will find a way to ritualize that, to allow that rite of passage to occur for everyone who wants to. We're always having people check us out and step over that threshold into membership. And we want you to know that you are very welcome in this community. Please email me at Pastoral Care. And the best way to do that is pastoralcare@trinitychurchofAustin.org. pastoralcare@trinitychurchofAustin.org. I will see that. Our associate pastor Mark will see that, and our seminary intern Gus will see that. And so we will reach back to you and have that discussion. So please consider that. And now I invite you to turn to our time for benediction. Now may the peace of God go with us. May the power of God sustain us. And may the love of God keep us together forever. Amen.
Walls mark our boundaries and keep us apart. Walls keep the world from our eyes and our heart. Tables around making room for more. Welcoming friends we had not known before. So build us a table and tear down the wall. Christ is our host, there is one.